66. And we've also done the Vampire Killer on page 71. I don't think we've done any of the other ones on that page, so I'll switch over to the next page and have a little recap. So, I believe we have done the Bad But Not Mad, page 122. And I've also done the Case of the Lethal Cuppa. On page 190. I'm not sure if I've uploaded that video yet, but I've definitely read the story. Okay, so as you can see, we've only crossed off a few on each page. We've got many, many more. I might start doing an Instagram poll to see which story you'd like me to read. We'll do that in the future. Today, I think what we're going to go for is the Boston Strangler on page 58. So, first, put this one away. Okay, page 58. Here we go. Almost perfect. This book as well I haven't been showing, but they've actually got some pictures. So this picture here is a picture of the Boston Strangler, Albert DeSalvo. This is when he was aged 35. Okay, let's begin. So this is the case of the Boston Strangler, Albert DeSalvo. It was a hot, steamy night in June 1962 when police were called to a rundown apartment building in the center of Boston. In the bedroom, they found the body of a young woman, partially clothed, with her limbs arranged in an obscene posture. The woman had been strangled with one of her own stockings. Although, on that sticky, humid night, the killing seemed only to be a random sex murder. The discovery was the beginning of a reign of terror that was to grip the city and capture the morbid imagination of the nation for more than 18 months. For the murder was the first carried out by one of the most notorious mass murderers of the century, the Boston Strangler. For a year and a half, police sought in vain to unmask the fiend, who left his trademark on 11 of the 13 bodies, a single stocking tied tightly around the neck of his victim. Of the two other victims, one was stabbed to death, and another died of a heart attack, allegedly in the arms of the strangler. The man behind the murders was former U.S. Army boxing champion Albert DeSalvo. In a twist as bizarre as the killings themselves, DeSalvo was never tried for the Strangler murders, but for an assorted series of robberies and sex attacks on women whom he did not kill. Although some still expressed doubt that DeSalvo was the Boston Strangler, the thick-set handyman who always wore his black hair slicked back and had an obsession for dressing in neat, freshly laundered white shirts, he did make a confession to the killings. Facts which only came to light after he was sentenced to life imprisonment seemed to confirm that DeSalvo was indeed the Strangler. Albert DeSalvo had been in trouble with the law since his childhood, mostly for breaking into homes, a skill that was to be put to terrifying use when he began his killing spree. As a young man, he served with the U.S. Army's occupation force in Germany, where he had married a local girl. Irmgard. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. But after having 2 children, the couple were divorced. He became the Army's middleweight boxing champion, but he there we have it. That's the end of the story. So, what I'm going to do now is remember to cross that off. Cross off